I got the call on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a late lunch break trying to catch up on emails with one hand and eat a lukewarm burrito with the other when my phone lit up with Grandma and Grandpa. It was kind of rare for them to call, especially in the middle of the day. Usually, if we talked at all, it was around holidays or birthdays, short and polite. I hesitated for a second before picking up. "Hey, Grandma," I said, trying to sound cheerful and not stressed. "Everything okay?" She sounded unusually formal. "Hi, dear. Your grandfather and I were wondering if you might stop by this weekend. We have something we'd like to discuss with you in person." That's never a good line. Sure. "Everything all right?" I asked again. "Oh yes," she said quickly. "We're fine. Just something family-related. We're inviting all the grandkids over separately." That struck me as weird. "Separately?" "Yes," she repeated. "We thought it would be best that way." She didn't offer anything more and I didn't push it. I told her I'd be there Sunday afternoon. I hung up, still holding half a burrito, appetite gone cold. Something didn't feel right. Sunday came quicker than I expected. The whole week, that phone call stuck in the back of my mind like a splinter. Separately. That word kept echoing. My grandparents weren't exactly the warm and fuzzy type, but even for them, this felt off. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my mom, not my sister. I didn't want to start any gossip or speculation if it turned out to be nothing though. If I'm being honest, I had already started speculating enough for all of us. They lived about 40 minutes away in the same two-story house they'd had since I was a kid. It sat on a quiet, tree-lined street with perfect grass and neighbors who waved when you drove by. A place frozen in time. On the drive, I thought about how different things felt lately. My cousins, especially Jake and Lauren, the golden grandchildren, were always front and center at family events. I wasn't jealous, at least not in the obvious sense. But over the years, the distance between me and that side of the family had stretched without ever really snapping. Just widened. I pulled into the driveway right at 1 o'clock like they asked. Grandpa's car was in the garage. Grandma's bird feeders were still hanging off the porch, spinning gently in the breeze. Everything looked normal. But it didn't feel normal. I rang the doorbell even though I knew I could have just walked in. That's what I used to do when I was a kid, run right through the door, shoes half-tied, yelling "Grandma," like I lived there. This time I waited. The door opened a little slower than usual. Grandpa stood there in his cardigan, pressed slacks, the whole uniform. He looked exactly the same, just maybe a bit more tired around the eyes. He gave me a small smile, the kind you give to someone you haven't seen in a while but aren't sure how you feel about seeing. "There's my big guy," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Come in, come in." I stepped inside. The house smelled the same, some combination of furniture polish, old paper, and whatever Grandma was cooking that always managed to feel warm even if it wasn't good. Grandma was in the living room, sitting upright in her usual chair, hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't get up. "Hi, sweetheart," she said with that same polite smile she used when she greeted her book club friends. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I said, trying to read the room. No cookies on the table. No half-hearted offer of tea. "No, tell us what you've been up to." Just silence, heavy and uncomfortable. "Should I sit?" I asked. "Yes, please," Grandma said, motioning to the armchair across from her. "We won't keep you long." That's when I knew this wasn't a visit. This was a meeting. I sat down in the chair across from them, the one with the stiff cushions that always made me feel like I was being interviewed. Grandpa remained standing for a second, then slowly lowered himself onto the couch next to Grandma. They looked at each other, just a glance, like they were reminding each other to stick to the plan. "We've been doing some estate planning," Grandma began, smoothing out an imaginary wrinkle in her skirt. "Getting things in order," Grandpa added, like he was clarifying something big. I nodded slowly. "Okay." They were both quiet again. The kind of silence that stretches too long to be normal. I could hear the old wall clock ticking behind me, each second feeling heavier than the last. "We've decided to update our will," Grandma said. Still no emotion in her voice. Just a statement of fact. Like she was reading off a checklist. "All right," I said cautiously. "That makes sense." Another pause. "We wanted to talk to you about it personally," Grandpa said. "So there wouldn't be any confusion down the road." I started to get that same feeling you get right before a crash when you see it coming but can't stop it. "Okay," I said again, quieter this time. Then Grandma folded her hands tighter and said it. "We've decided to leave the estate to Jake, Lauren, and Emily. My cousins. Just them." I blinked. For a second I actually thought maybe I'd misheard her. That maybe there was a but coming. Or an explanation. Or anything, really. But they just sat there. Still. Calm. Like this was completely normal. To Jake, Lauren, and Emily, Grandma repeated gently. We felt it was the most practical choice. I let out a quiet breath through my nose, trying not to react too fast. Okay. I'm not sure I understand. It's nothing personal, Grandpa said quickly, like he'd practiced that phrase. We just considered who's been most involved. Over the years. There it was. The subtle jab dressed up as reason. Most involved. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. You mean the ones who show up to brunches and call every Sunday? Grandma didn't respond right away. She just tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to make sure I wasn't going to get emotional. Those things matter, she said. We wanted to recognize the relationships that have remained consistent. I nodded slowly, trying to stay composed. Right? And I guess mine wasn't. We don't want you to feel hurt, Grandpa added. You've always been a good kid. We just felt this was what made the most sense. That word again. Sense. Funny how people use it when they're doing something that doesn't feel right, even to them. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just stared at the little floral pattern on the carpet between my feet. It was faded now, probably older than me. I remembered sitting there with a juice box as a kid, building Lego towers while Grandpa watched golf with the sound low. Now I was here, as an adult, trying not to look like I'd been punched in the gut. I see, I finally said. My voice sounded weird to me, too steady, like I was pretending to be someone else. Grandma offered a soft smile, the kind that was meant to say, I hope you understand, but felt more like, that'll be all. We're telling each of you individually, she said. So there's no awkwardness later. No surprises. Except that this was a surprise. A quiet, precise one. I looked up. So, what happens to the rest of us? She blinked. The rest? The other grandkids. Me. Nora. Josh. Are we in it at all? Grandpa cleared his throat, looked uncomfortable. We've left some personal items for everyone. Mementos. And we'll mention all of you, of course. Mention. Like a footnote. I nodded again because I didn't know what else to do. Right? Just not the house. Or money. Or anything that you know matters. That came out sharper than I meant it to. Grandma's smile disappeared. She folded her hands tighter in her lap. We're not trying to punish anyone. And yet, that's exactly what it felt like. Grandpa leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees like he was getting ready to lecture or justify. Same difference in this house. You've always been independent, he said. You've built your own life, haven't needed much from us. That's something we respect. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was such a tidy way to frame exclusion, make it sound like a compliment. Jake's got the kids, he continued. Lauren just bought a house. Emily's still paying off school. They're in a different phase of life. A little support could go a long way. I stared at them, feeling this strange blend of numb and burning. Like frostbite. So, I said carefully, because I didn't struggle in front of you, I don't count. Grandma looked almost offended. That's not what we said. No, I said. It's just what you meant. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I could see it on their faces, they were already getting defensive, probably rehearsed as too. It wasn't about favoritism, they tell themselves. It was about logic. Fairness. Practicality. All those words that suck the blood out of emotion. But the truth was, this wasn't logical. It was personal. It always had been. For a minute, no one spoke. The air felt too still, like the room itself was holding its breath. I could hear the low hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen. A bird chirped outside. I think it was a robin, it didn't care about wills or who got what. I broke the silence. I visited Grandpa in the hospital when he had that heart scare, I said quietly. No one asked me to. I just went. Grandpa looked down at his hands. I helped clean out your garage when you were moving stuff last spring. Even when Jake bailed. I took the day off work. Still nothing. I called you on your anniversary last year. You didn't pick up, but I left a message. Grandma's lips pressed together in a thin line, like she wasn't sure if she should feel guilty or just stay the course. I didn't show up to every brunch, I continued. But it's not like I disappeared. I just lived. Like everyone else. I wasn't trying to beg. I wasn't even trying to make them change their minds. I just needed them to see me. To realize that what they were doing wasn't just about dividing assets, it was about dividing people. You were never invisible to us, Grandma said finally, but it sounded rehearsed. Soft. Hollow. I looked her in the eyes. Then why does it feel like I am? That question, why does it feel like I am? Hung in the air like smoke. Heavy. Uncomfortable. They didn't answer right away. Grandpa glanced at Grandma like maybe it was her turn to speak, but she stayed quiet, staring at a spot on the carpet like she was seeing something I couldn't. I think, Grandpa said finally, his voice slower now that we've made peace with our decision. We know it may not feel fair, but that's life sometimes. That's life. God, I hate that phrase. It's what people say when they want to avoid accountability. Wrap it all up in a shrug and pretend it's just the way the world works. Like they didn't have a choice in the matter. Sure, I said flatly. That's life. And choices have consequences, right? That caught their attention. Grandma sat up straighter. What does that mean? I didn't answer immediately. I didn't even fully know what I meant. I wasn't threatening anything, but the truth was something had shifted. Not just in this room, but in my heart. Something had closed. Quietly. Cleanly. I think, I said slowly, it just means I see things more clearly now. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just clear. Grandma sighed and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She probably thought I was going to argue more, push for a change of heart. But I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to beg or fight or keep playing this game where I pretended to be part of a family that had already decided I wasn't. I didn't come here to argue, I said, standing up from the chair, feeling a quiet resolve settle in my chest. I came because you asked me to. There was a pause. I could hear the ticking of that damn clock again, every second stretching into eternity. Grandma, I said quietly, more to her than Grandpa, I just wanted you to know I was here. I did care. I do care. Even if you've already made up your mind. Her face softened for just a moment, like maybe she regretted how things had gone. But it was too late. I'd already seen too much, understood too much, and I wasn't going to stick around waiting for scraps. I'm glad you told me in person, I added, trying to sound as neutral as possible. It's better this way. They didn't respond. Grandma looked away like she was already thinking about something else. Grandpa's hands were resting on his lap, his fingers tapping softly, but he didn't look up. I turned to leave, my hand on the doorknob. And for the first time, I realized that I was walking out of something, not just a visit, but a chapter in my life that was already closing without ceremony. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting me like a slap. The driveway seemed longer, somehow emptier. And as I drove away, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, hollow acceptance. Like the door they just shut wasn't the first one. It was just the most obvious. I didn't expect them to reach out. Honestly, I thought that would be the end of it. They'd made their decision, I'd heard it, and that was that. But life has a funny way of surprising you even when you're not looking for it. It was a few days later on a Thursday evening when my phone rang. The name on the screen? Grandma. I almost didn't pick up. Maybe I was being petty, or maybe I was just done, but I was so close to hitting ignore and letting it go to voicemail. Then the phone buzzed again, and before I could think better of it, I swiped to answer. Hello? Hi, dear. It's Grandma. Her voice was quieter than usual, like she'd been holding her breath. I've been thinking about our conversation. I leaned back in my chair, not sure where this was going. Yeah? I just wanted to apologize, she said, and there was a long pause before she added, I think we may have been too blunt. We didn't mean to hurt you. There was no anger in her voice, just weariness. A kind of tiredness that comes from too many years of keeping things buried. I didn't know how to respond. I could feel myself holding my breath too, like if I said the wrong thing, I'd break something that couldn't be fixed. I don't know what I was expecting, I said finally, my voice small. I guess I thought after all these years it would be different. Grandma was quiet for a long time. It should have been. And just like that I felt a crack, a small, almost imperceptible shift. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. But it was something. A recognition maybe that they hadn't been perfect either. I think I'll be okay, I said after a while, because I knew I would be. I just wanted you to know I tried. She didn't answer right away, but I heard her exhale softly. Then she said, I know you did. We do see that. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said goodbye and hung up. But as I put my phone down, I realized I felt a little lighter. Not a lot. Just enough to remind myself that sometimes the hardest part is letting go of expectations even when they come from people you love. After the call with Grandma, things settled back into a strange quiet. No more phone calls. No more visits. It was like the world had continued spinning, but I was now in a different orbit, one where my place in the family wasn't as certain as it used to be. I tried to act like it didn't bother me, but it did. Of course it did. You don't just brush off something like that. It's like a stone dropped in a pond, the ripples stretch out and touch everything, even the things you don't want them to. I started noticing the little things. How my mom and aunt would get together for dinner and talk about the next family reunion, but they never once asked me if I was coming. How Jake and Lauren kept posting pictures of their kids, their houses, their lives on social media, the kind of things they'd probably show me in person if they thought I still mattered. But I stayed quiet. I kept to myself mostly. I didn't want to make a scene or create any more tension. I had enough of that for a lifetime. Then one day I got a message from my sister, Nora. It was simple, almost casual. "Hey, are you okay?" I stared at the message for a minute before responding. It wasn't a long message, but I knew it meant something. She'd been the one person who always seemed to get it, the unspoken things that hung in the air at family gatherings. The way Grandma and Grandpa had always made me feel like I was just a little outside of their world. I typed back, "I'm okay. Just been thinking a lot." She responded almost instantly. "I know. I've been thinking about it too. You don't have to explain. I get it." For the first time in a while, I felt seen. Really seen. Not just as a grandkid or someone who was supposed to just accept whatever was handed out to them, but as me, a person with my own feelings, my own space in this family. I didn't tell her about the will. I didn't need to. She knew. A few weeks passed, and eventually the next family gathering came around, a simple dinner, nothing fancy. It was supposed to be a celebration for Grandma's birthday, but I almost didn't want to go. The last thing I needed was to sit in that living room pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. But of course, my mom convinced me to come. "Just for a little while," she said. "It'll be good for everyone." So I went. I showed up at Grandma's house, half expecting it to feel like an awkward, silent war zone. But surprisingly, it was quieter than I anticipated. Not tense, not loud, but a kind of calm that made everything feel distant. Like people were still there, but they weren't really present. I did what I always did, said hi to Aunt Linda, helped set the table, made small talk with the cousins who didn't really know how to look me in the eye anymore. Jake and Lauren seemed especially distant, like they didn't want to feel guilty about the whole will situation. Then, about an hour in, Grandma called us all into the living room for cake. It was the usual routine. The little plastic candles, the big smile on Grandma's face as she held the cake up for a picture. But there was something different this time. It wasn't the forced smile, or the awkwardness, or even the fact that everyone else was waiting for me to participate in the birthday cheer. It was the way Grandma looked at me. She was standing there, cake in hand, and for the first time in ages, she didn't look like she was acting out a role. She looked at me like I was her grandkid again, not just the other one. I didn't say anything, but I saw the change in her eyes, a kind of understanding, or maybe regret. A silent admission that she realized how much she'd pushed me out. "Make a wish, Grandma," Jake said, half smiling, his phone ready for a picture. But I wasn't focused on the cake. I was focused on what had shifted between us. As the evening continued, things slowly started to feel less like a performance. Grandma and Grandpa talked to me a little more, like they remembered who I was, not just as a grandkid who didn't fit into their picture of the family, but as a person who had always been there, even if they didn't acknowledge it. It wasn't perfect. The distance wasn't gone. But it was the beginning of something different, a chance to rebuild, if only slightly. I didn't know if things would ever go back to how they were, but maybe they didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. And that was enough for now. After that dinner, things didn't magically fix themselves. Of course, they didn't. But something small had changed. Like a crack in the wall that had been there for years, only just beginning to show. I still didn't feel fully a part of things. The dynamic at family events wasn't the same. I didn't expect it to be. But over time, there was less distance in the room. Less of that feeling that I wasn't really supposed to be there. Grandma and Grandpa started calling more often, though it was mostly about small surface-level stuff. But the calls weren't as stiff anymore. I didn't jump into their world all at once, though. I still kept a bit of distance, not out of anger, but because I didn't want to rush into something that wasn't ready yet. But every time I picked up the phone and heard one of them on the other end, it felt like a little more of the space between us was closing. Then, one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. It wasn't a holiday card or a birthday note. It was from Grandma. I almost didn't open it. I'd been through enough mixed signals to last me a lifetime. But something in me decided to take a chance. Inside, there was a simple note. "I've been thinking a lot about what we discussed. I'm sorry for how things went. I want you to know that you matter to us, always have. We may not have shown it the way we should have. But we do love you. I hope we can make more memories together. It's not too late, is it?" That was all. No grand gesture. No apology for the will. Just an acknowledgement of what had been broken, and a hope, quiet but sincere, that things could get better. I sat there for a while, just holding the letter. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the kind of apology I'd hoped for, but it was something. And for the first time in ages, I felt like the door they'd closed had cracked open. Just a little. It was a start. A small one, but enough to remind me that family, even the complicated ones, can still change, even if it takes time. The letter from Grandma was a turning point for me. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was more than I ever expected from them. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a door opening a little wider, even if it creaked. I took my time processing it. I didn't rush to call them back. I didn't feel the need to make things right in an instant. Instead, I let myself sit with the feelings, let the weight of it settle in. It was more about the acknowledgement, the quiet shift that happened when someone takes responsibility, even in a small way. A few weeks later, I called Grandma, just to talk. No agenda, no forced apologies, no deep conversations about the will or how everything had gone wrong. I just wanted to see where we could go from here. Her voice was soft when she picked up, but there was warmth in it, too. Not the kind of warmth you fake to fill space, but the kind that comes with time and understanding. "I'm glad you called," she said, and I could hear the sincerity. Felt real. "I'm glad you wrote," I said, not knowing how else to respond. We talked about small things at first. The weather, the garden, old TV shows we used to watch. But it felt different. The conversation didn't have the heaviness it once did. It was as if we were finding a new rhythm, one where the past didn't have to define us. Over the next few months, things slowly began to change. I started going over more often, just for coffee, or to help them with small things around the house. Nothing major, but it felt good, in a quiet, steady way. I didn't expect everything to be fixed. Not yet. But I realized that the distance that had been between us was slowly shrinking, and I could live with that. Maybe things would never be perfect. Maybe I'd never be as involved as my cousins. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that, for once, I felt like I had a place. Not because of the will or the inheritance or any of that, but because I was there, and they were choosing to meet me halfway. And that, I realized, was enough.